You're driving through Montana and you spot a small town. It looks harmless, but you don't know that right under the street, there used to be an old world that once operated like a secret downtown. You also don't know there are places where, when winter hits, the road becomes a real dead end. This is 10 creepiest small towns in Montana, and each town has one detail that will make you ask, why would anyone live here? The question is, if your car breaks down here after dark, do you stay or do you run? Watch until the end and tell me in the comments which town gave you the biggest chills. Number 10. Libby looks like the kind of place you would put on a postcard. Pine trees, mountain air, a small town that feels like it should smell like coffee and fresh snow. But Libby earns its creepy reputation in a way that is almost unfair, because the scariest thing here was never a shadow in the woods. It was something you could not see at all. Here is why. For decades, a vermiculite mine near Libby produced a massive share of the world's vermiculite supply, and that material did not just stay in the ground. It went into everyday life. Vermiculite was used in insulation and in gardening products, the kind of stuff that ends up in attics, walls, basements, and backyards. Normal places, quiet places. The problem is that the vermiculite from this area was contaminated with asbestos fibers. So the creepy part is not a haunted house. It is the idea that the danger could ride along in dust, and dust does not need permission to travel. Picture this. You are doing the most boring adult task imaginable, checking the attic. You pop the hatch, you shine a flashlight, and you see that fluffy, pebbly insulation sitting there like it has been waiting. In most towns, that is just home maintenance. In Libby, it feels like opening a horror movie where the villain is microscopic and has unlimited patience. It is like glitter at a kid's craft table, except the joke is that you never get all of it out, and you do not even know where it drifted. By the numbers, this is not a rumor town. The EPA placed Libby on the Superfund National Priorities list in October 2002. In 2009, the EPA declared a public health emergency in Libby, and the agency says it was the first time it had ever done that. That is a line that makes people sit up straight because it tells you this was not just a local issue. This was serious enough to get a rare label. And then comes the part that feels strangely eerie in the opposite direction. Cleanup on a scale that sounds almost impossible. Thousands of properties investigated. More than 2,600 cleanups completed in Libby and nearby Troy, and more than 1 million cubic yards of contaminated soil removed and replaced. That is not just a cleanup. That is a town getting rebooted 1 yard at a time. So Libby is creepy because it flips the script. It is not about what lurks in the forest. It is about what used to lurk in plain sight, in the places you would never film for a ghost story. Would you rather spend one night in a haunted hotel or buy a fixer-upper where the attic comes with a question mark? Tell me in the comments, because the next place on this list makes you feel trapped for a totally different reason, and it is not invisible at all. Number 9. Virginia City. Virginia City feels like a place that's smiling at you, while quietly keeping secrets behind its teeth, because this isn't a ghost town in the classic sense. It's not empty, it's not erased. It still has people, tours, shops, and the kind of old-time treats that make you feel like you're just browsing, even when your gut is saying, why does this street feel staged? On paper, Virginia City is tiny. In real history, it was enormous. It exploded during the Alder Gulch Gold Rush in the 1860s, and for a while it even served as Montana's territorial capital. That's the weird part. This place used to run the show, and somehow it never stopped acting like it does. The boardwalks, the wooden storefronts, the old facades lined up like they're posing for a photograph that never finishes developing. The whole historic district is protected and recognized for its significance, which is a fancy way of saying the past here isn't a vibe. It's the infrastructure. Now here's why Virginia City earns a spot on a creepiest towns list without needing to fake anything. Most towns feel safer when they're active. Here, activity is part of the unease. In daylight, it can feel charming, like an Old West postcard that somehow learned how to take credit cards. But as the day fades, the charm tightens into something stranger. Streetlights turn the boardwalk into a long, narrow stage. Dark windows become black mirrors, and every step on those planks gives you that slow creak that sounds like the town is counting you in, one footfall at a time. Virginia City also leans into the mood on purpose. It runs ghost walks, themed evening strolls, and even cemetery tour options. And that's genius because it doesn't have to convince you of anything supernatural. It just gives your imagination a microphone and steps back. Suddenly, the silence feels heavier. A breeze slipping between buildings feels like a whisper that was never meant for you. The street looks like it's waiting for actors to walk out and start the next scene, except nobody comes. So your brain starts writing the script on its own. And that's the true creep factor. Virginia City is a town that's still open for business, but it can feel like it's operating on an older timeline. Like history didn't move out, it just rearranged the furniture and told everyone to speak softly. So let me ask you, would you rather spend the night in a town that's abandoned, or in a town that's still alive, but feels like it never stopped watching? Because the next place on this list doesn't rely on atmosphere at all. It's creepy for reasons you can't ignore. Number 8, Deer Lodge. Deer Lodge has a kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels supervised, like the town itself is telling you to lower your voice, stand up straight, and stop fidgeting. And the reason is simple. This is home to the old Montana prison, a place that doesn't need ghost stories to feel unsettling. The building does the work all by itself. The prison's roots go back to 1871, and for more than a century it operated right here in Deer Lodge, until the state moved inmates to a newer facility in 1979. That timeline matters because it means this isn't some ancient ruin from a different world. It's modern enough to feel familiar and old enough to feel heavy. The kind of heavy you can't explain without using words like rules, routine, and you don't get to choose. Even the architecture looks like a warning. The wall alone is the kind of detail that sticks in your head. Built from local sandstone, towering around 20 feet high, and sunk several feet into the ground. It's not just a barrier, it's a statement. The opposite of open concept living. Montana really said, how about closed concept everything, and then built it out of rock. Today, the old Montana prison complex is a museum space with multiple museums inside the same grounds. You can walk through areas that once controlled people's days down to the minute. And that's where the creep factor changes flavor, because when you stand in a cell block, your brain starts doing math without your permission. How many footsteps from here to there? How many breaths in a room that small? How many nights would feel exactly the same? The sound is part of it too. A place like this doesn't echo the way a normal building echoes. It repeats you. You hear your own steps bounce back like the hallway is answering. Doors and bars don't just separate space, they divide your confidence. You can be calm 1 second, then you see a narrow corridor and your body quietly votes no. And yes, Deer Lodge leans into the atmosphere. They offer tours, and there are even nighttime experiences for people who want the extra adrenaline. Not because anyone has to invent a monster here, but because the setting already feels like it's watching you. This is the kind of place where your phone's screen time warning suddenly makes emotional sense. Like, yeah, maybe freedom is a feature and not a default setting. So here's the question. Would you rather explore a town that feels empty, or step inside a place that feels full of rules, even decades after the last lock clicked shut? Because the next town on this list isn't about confinement at all. It's about what happens when the past moves out, but leaves the lights on. Number 7, Bannack. Bannack is what happens when a town is born overnight and then nobody sticks around to raise it. This isn't just a random ghost town in the woods. Bannack is the kind of place that makes you realize the Wild West wasn't a costume. It was a mood, and some places still wear it like it never stopped being necessary. Here's the real backbone of the story. Bannack sits at the start of Montana's gold era. Gold was discovered here on July 28, 1862, and the place exploded. Within a year, the population surged into the thousands. People poured in with the same dream: strike it rich fast, then disappear richer. Bannack even became Montana's first territorial capital, which is wild when you think about it. A town built on hope, greed, and dirt roads was briefly in charge of an entire territory. That's like making the loudest guy in a bar the mayor and pretending it's a long-term plan. And yet Bannack didn't fade out like a normal town. It froze. Today it's preserved as a state park with more than 50 buildings still lining its main street. That's the part that feels uncanny. You walk past real storefronts, real cabins, real structures that look like they're waiting for someone to flip the sign from closed to open. The bones are still standing, and that's why it feels eerie. Not because something is there, but because so much is still here and nobody's using it. The creep factor in Bannack is the silence after the stampede. Boomtown energy doesn't just vanish politely, it leaves marks. You can feel it in the way the street sits too straight, like it's bracing. You can feel it in the way doors and windows stare back, like the town is trying to remember the last time it was full. It's a place that looks ready for a crowd but only gets wind. And Bannack knows what it is. They even hold events and guided walks that lean into the nighttime atmosphere. Ghost walks, lanterns, storytellers. Not because anyone has to invent a monster, but because the setting already does half the narrating. You don't need special effects when the town itself feels like an old photograph that never finished developing. Bannack also has that frontier vibe that hits a specific American nerve, the idea that the law showed up late and everybody had to improvise until it did. This place feels like an early draft of America, still open on the screen, cursor blinking, waiting for the next line. So let me ask you, would you rather spend a night in a modern town with streetlights and security cameras, or walk a main street from the 1860s where the buildings still look like they're listening? Because the next place on this list doesn't feel frozen in time. It feels like time burned right through it. Number 6, Garnet. Garnet is the kind of ghost town that doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused, like the whole place stepped outside for a minute and just never came back. And that's what makes it different from the usual Old West ruin story. Garnet isn't just a town that died. It's a town that was deliberately kept in a state of arrested decay, preserved so the buildings stay real, rough, and strangely present. The origin story starts like most Montana legends do, gold and urgency. Garnet grew out of mining activity in First Chance Gulch. By the late 1890s, it had become a full-on boomtown. At its peak in early 1898, it had close to 1,000 residents, plus the kind of amenities that make you forget you're in the mountains. Multiple stores, hotels, a school, a doctor's office, and 13 saloons. 13. That number alone tells you the town wasn't built for long-term peace. It was built for short-term chaos. Then the volume dropped. By the early 1900s, the population thinned out, and a major fire in 1912 damaged much of the business district. The town didn't explode in one dramatic moment. It slowly exhaled. And what remained is what you see today. A street of weathered structures that look like they could still open for business if someone remembered where they left the key. The creepiness begins before you even arrive. The road in is steep, narrow, and rough, the kind of drive that makes you check your gas gauge and your life choices at the same time. And in winter, you don't just swing by. Access can require snowshoes, cross-country skis, or a snowmobile, which means the town is guarded by the simplest bouncer imaginable. Montana weather, no ticket booth, no security guard, just snow saying, "Not today." Once you're there, everything feels too intact to be comfortable. Not modern, not restored into a theme park, just left. And that's what makes your imagination run wild. A creaking porch isn't just a creak, it feels like a reply. A dark window isn't just glass, it feels like a black mirror. Silence doesn't feel empty, it feels occupied. Garnet is basically a museum where the building is the exhibit and Winter is the curator. It's like someone put an entire town on Do Not Disturb, and the notification never turned off. So let me ask you, would you rather explore a ghost town you can reach with a nice paved road, or one that makes you earn the silence? Because the next place on this list is creepy in a totally different way. It's not preserved, it's still performing. And that might be worse. Number 5. Havre. Havre is the kind of small town that looks completely normal, until you learn it has a second version of itself hiding right under your feet. Not a rumor, not a tunnel some teenagers made up for a scary story. A real underground stretch of town history that survived because the surface level didn't. Here's the setup. In 1904, a major fire tore through Havre's downtown and destroyed much of the business district. And when a town burns, you either shut down or you adapt. Havre adapted in the most quietly unsettling way possible. While the streets above were being rebuilt, parts of the local business scene shifted below street level. Under the sidewalks, under the storefronts, in spaces that were never meant to feel like a downtown, but ended up becoming one anyway. Today, that history is preserved as Havre Beneath the Streets, a guided walk through what's essentially a buried time capsule. It stretches roughly the length of a city block, and it's arranged in a way that makes your brain do a double take. You walk into rooms that recreate what people used to do down there. Saloon setups, old storefront scenes, and displays that highlight the kinds of businesses that operated in that era. It's educational, sure, but it's also the kind of educational that makes you keep checking the ceiling, because being underground flips a switch in your body. Your shoulders tighten, your voice lowers. Your instincts start asking questions you weren't planning to answer. And that's why Havre works so well on a Creepiest Towns list. The creepiness isn't about ghosts. It's about the feeling that a town can have a hidden layer of itself, like a secret tab running in the background. Above ground, you're in modern Montana. Below ground, you're walking through a version of the town that exists because the surface was temporarily unlivable. That's a strange thought. Not haunted, but definitely off. It also has that perfect contrast the human brain loves: normal daylight life on top and a quiet, dim, preserved world underneath. It's like a small town with a basement mode. You think you're going downtown, and suddenly downtown goes down. If your hometown had an underground level, it would either be full of storage boxes and regret, or it would be Havre, where people once said, "We still have to make money, so let's just do business under the street." So let me ask you this. Would you rather explore a ghost town where everything is out in the open? Or a town where the weirdest part is literally buried beneath the place? People still walk every day, because the next location on this list isn't hidden at all. It's right there on the map, and somehow that makes it feel even more unsettling. Number 4. Cooke City, Silvergate. Cooke City and Silvergate, Montana are the kind of places you don't stop by. You arrive there, and the difference matters because these towns sit at the edge of Yellowstone like a little outpost that feels more like a last checkpoint than a destination. It's beautiful, it's tiny, and when the weather decides to get serious, it becomes the definition of end of the road. Start with how small this really is. Cooke City's population was recorded in the double digits, and Silvergate is even smaller. Together, they feel less like towns and more like a handful of buildings that refuse to leave. That scale changes everything. In a normal place, you can disappear into a crowd. Here, the crowd is basically the front desk at your motel. The setting is what makes it creepy in the Montana way. You're right by Yellowstone's northeast entrance, surrounded by mountains, long distances, and the kind of quiet that doesn't sound empty, it sounds alert. It and the road logic here is strange in a way your brain immediately notices. Yellowstone has a route that can stay open for regular vehicles year-round from the north entrance through the park to Cooke City. So you can get in even in winter, which makes the whole thing feel deceptively normal. But the moment you look east, the story changes. The famous Beartooth Highway, the one people rave about in summer, is a seasonal road. When winter hits, that direction is simply done. Closed. Not maybe. Not try it. It's like the map still has a line there, but nature draws a big red X across it. That's the signature fear here. Single corridor anxiety. One dependable route. One way in, one way out. It's not a haunted tunnel that closes at night. It's an entire mountain pass that closes for months because snow and wind don't negotiate. And just to make it feel extra dramatic, Beartooth Pass climbs to nearly 11,000 feet. That's not a scenic drive, that's altitude with a personality. Your lungs notice before your brain does. Now imagine arriving late in the day, the light drops fast behind the ridgelines. The wind starts moving like it owns the place. You glance at your phone and realize service is more of a suggestion out here. In a big city, being alone is a choice. Out here, it's the default setting. Cooke City feels like a town built for people who love the outdoors, and for weather that's perfectly happy to keep them there. So let me ask you, would you rather spend a night in a place where the roads go everywhere, or in a place where the landscape can quietly say, "Nope, you're staying on this side until I feel like reopening the world"? Because the next town on this list isn't about being trapped by winter. It's about being trapped by something humans built. Number 3, Colstrip. Colstrip isn't creepy because it's empty. It's creepy because it's functional. It's a town built around a machine so large that you can feel it in the way the place is organized. Some towns are shaped by rivers or mountains. Colstrip is shaped by energy. And once you realize that, the whole vibe changes from small town to outpost attached to a power switch. Colstrip's story starts as a resource town. It grew around coal mining, and over time it became tied to one of the biggest coal power facilities in the region. This isn't a small plant humming quietly in the background. It's the kind of infrastructure that defines the horizon. For years, the Colstrip power plant had 4 units. 2 of them, Units 1 and 2, were retired in January 2020. Units 3 and 4 remain with a combined capacity around 1,080 megawatts. That number doesn't need to mean anything to you technically. Emotionally, it means this place is not built for cozy. It's built for output, and here's where the creep factor sneaks in. Colstrip doesn't just have an industry, the industry has a town. When the plant runs, jobs run. When the plant changes, the entire local future changes with it. Even researchers who study energy communities describe the post-2020 situation as uncertain, partly because ownership and planning around the remaining units is complicated. That uncertainty is the kind that sits in the background like a low-frequency hum. You don't always hear it, but your body knows it's there. Then there's the invisible side of the story, the part that makes Colstrip feel like a place with a second layer beneath it. Coal ash, groundwater monitoring, cleanup systems. Montana's environmental agency has an ongoing coal ash pond cleanup program here with monitoring wells and regular sampling, plus a settlement framework for managing contamination concerns around older ash ponds. That's the kind of detail that hits differently because it turns the ground into a file folder. You can't see it, but someone is tracking it, measuring it, and managing it, which tells you this isn't ancient history. It's an ongoing relationship between a town and what it powered. So imagine living in a place where the skyline reminds you what pays the bills and the soil reminds you what it costs. It's like living next to a 24/7 machine that never sleeps. And the town learned to nap to its rhythm. Colstrip can feel like an extension cord with a zip code. Not haunted, exactly, just dependent. Would you rather live in a town that's fading quietly or in a town that feels like it's one board, meeting away from a whole new reality? Because the next town on this list isn't powered by a plant. It's powered by pure silence. Number 2, St. Marie. St. Marie is the kind of place that looks like a normal American neighborhood, until you notice what's missing. The streets are laid out like a suburb, the houses sit in neat rows. The whole place has that someone planned this feeling, and yet the atmosphere doesn't feel lived in. It feels muted like a sitcom set after the studio lights go out. That's because St. Marie isn't a town that grew naturally. It's a community that came from a system. This area was tied to the Glasgow Air Force Base, a Cold War-era installation whose housing spilled into what became St. Marie. The base operated in phases and ultimately shut down in 1976. And when something as big as a military base turns off, it doesn't just change a job market. It changes the heartbeat of everything around it. Today, St. Marie still has residents, but it's small. Just a few hundred people living in a layout that feels designed for far more. That mismatch is where the creepiness comes from. In most places, quiet can be relaxing. Here, quiet feels structural. Like the neighborhood is waiting for a population that never arrives. And then there's the detail that makes the whole story feel a little more strange. After the base closed, parts of the former installation evolved into a restricted kind of industrial afterlife. The housing was sold off, but the airfield and surrounding facilities became connected to flight testing activity, with ties to Boeing operations in the area, so you end up with this odd pairing. A near-silent residential grid next to a place that still has "do not enter" energy. That's a recipe for curiosity because Americans are wired to pay attention when a normal-looking road suddenly becomes an off-limits road. St. Marie also has that uncanny copy-paste look that military housing often creates. Repeated structures, repeated blocks, repeated streets. When that kind of design loses people, it can feel less like a community and more like a paused simulation. Like someone forgot to spawn the NPCs. You can stand on a corner and feel like you're in a neighborhood that's technically real, but emotionally unfinished. And that's the key. St. Marie isn't creepy because it's haunted. It's creepy because it's an almost town, a suburban shell built for a purpose, then left with a question mark when that purpose disappeared. The kind of place where you can't stop yourself from thinking, if the base was the reason this existed, what is the reason now? So let me ask you, would you rather spend a night in a classic ghost town with broken saloons and dusty streets, or in a neighborhood that still looks ready for a PTA meeting but feels like the meeting was canceled decades ago? Because the next place on this list takes small town to an extreme that doesn't even sound real. Number 1. Jordan is creepy in a way that doesn't rely on shadows or abandoned buildings. It's creepy because it's official. It's the county seat of Garfield County, which sounds like it should mean traffic, errands, and a line at the courthouse. But then you look at the numbers and realize the center of this county is surrounded by a whole lot of almost nothing. Jordan itself had a 2020 population of 356. The entire county had 473 people, and according to census data, every single one of them lives in rural territory. That means there's no big town nearby to absorb the noise, no suburbs to soften the silence, just open land, long roads, and a government hub that feels like it's operating at the edge of the map, and that's the signature feeling here, a place with responsibilities bigger than its footprint. Jordan is the only incorporated community in the county, so it carries the weight of being the administrative heartbeat for a region that's bigger than it feels. It's not a ghost town, it's the county seat of almost nobody. The kind of place where rush hour sounds like one pickup truck and a decision. What makes it eerie is how quiet the landscape becomes when the human layer thins out. In a city, silence is a moment. Out here, silence is the default setting. Wind becomes the background music. Distance becomes a personality trait. Even the name Big Dry Creek, which runs through the area, sounds like the land is being honest with you. There's a USGS stream gauge right at Jordan, which is a strangely perfect detail for a town like this. When you're this isolated, even the creek feels like something you keep an eye on, like it's part of the town's routine. Then Jordan adds a second kind of unsettling that most people never expect. Deep time. Garfield County sits in an area famous in paleontology tied to the Hell Creek Formation. Near Jordan in the early 1900s, the first Tyrannosaurus rex ever identified was discovered. Today, the local museum in Jordan even displays a T-Rex skull. So you're standing in a place where modern life is minimal, but the ground beneath you has a resume that goes back tens of millions of years. That contrast hits a weird psychological nerve. It makes the human scale feel temporary, Like the land was here long before the town showed up, and it will be here long after the paperwork stops. Jordan is the kind of location that makes you lower your voice without realizing it, not because you're afraid of being heard, but because it feels like the space itself is listening. It's a town in airplane mode, running on wind, wide sky, and courthouse hours. So here's the question. Would you rather spend a night somewhere haunted or somewhere so quiet and official that your own thoughts start using an inside voice? After all, 10 towns, the creepiest thing about Montana isn't a monster in the woods or a ghost in a window. It's how different creepy can be when you zoom in. Sometimes it's a place frozen in time. Sometimes it's a town built around a machine. Sometimes it's just the feeling of being at the end of the road with nothing but wind and distance between you and the nearest help. Montana doesn't always scare you with what's there. It scares you with what isn't. Now I want to hear from you. Which town on this list hit you the hardest, and why? Was it the underground history, the prison walls, the ghost walk vibes, or that eerie suburban silence? Drop your pick in the comments and tell me what you'd add as an honorable mention. If you enjoyed this darker road trip through Montana, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because the next list goes even deeper into places that feel normal. Until they don't.